we are going to bring up Mr. John Ford and Will Newman. John, it says right here, is one of the world's top copywriters, and I believe it because I've read a bunch of his stuff. In addition to that, he has taught copywriting all over the world. They've got a huge list of all the different places that he's taught copy in, and I won't go through it because it's really amazing. But you live in France right now, is that correct? Wow, sweet. In Paris. There you go, absolutely. So he lives in France. Obviously, if your dream is to live anywhere in the world and do copywriting and have a great lifestyle and enjoy it all, then certainly John is an excellent person to teach that to you. Will is like, he's been a presenter. He's done, he did one on crafting powerful headlines. He's also has Wordsmith Marketing, specialized in writing in the copy or in the health, computer, and fundraising niches. So we also know Will because he handles the Headline and Leads intensive program for the Circle of Success and has been a coach and has been around just doing all kinds of stuff every day, blessing all of our lives and being an excellent inspiration to all of us. And so, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our two fabulous speakers, Will Newman and John Ford. There you go, guys.
Will and I have given this presentation before. I'm a type of person that I can't resist editing stuff. I heard a story one time about a guy who was a painter, and this is a French painter who was constantly making changes on his painting. So he'd take years and years and years to do a portrait, then he would sell it and it would go into a gallery, and they actually caught him with wet paints and a palette underneath his jacket trying to change the painting. So when Will and I found out we were going to reprise our presentation about getting to know your prospect, Will said, so we're okay, you know, we have this presentation that we did before, we know it pretty well, we can just go ahead and do it. And I said, well, I can't give you any details right now because I'm kind of in a rush, but the presentation is completely different from anything we've ever done before. So it only talks about 3 items and more details to follow. And then I proceeded not to tell him for a couple of weeks. So Will was kind of hanging on the edge. So when we worked out this presentation, we got on the phone, we talked about it, and this really is going to focus on just 3 things. I would have whittled it down to just one thing in keeping with Michael Masterson's power of one concept, but we just couldn't pull it off. So just 3 things about getting to know your prospect, which is so key to making any kind of ad copy work. Now, one of the things that we have done, brought over from the last time we did this presentation, is that we have examples to show you, because what's better to understand than anything than by looking at examples. So what I looked for, instead of getting examples of really great copy that is about knowing your prospect, I thought what would drive it home is showing you guys some advertising that is written without knowing the prospect, and you would see the cost of not knowing a prospect, about how clearly it doesn't work if you don't know something about the person that you're trying to market to. So here's the first example here. This is a classified dating ad that I found in a local shopping newspaper. Fat, flatulent, over 40, cigar-smoking redneck seeks sexy woman with big hair to cook, clean, and pick up unemployment checks. Well, I don't know. Does anybody, you know, you don't have to raise your hands, but any of the lovely women out there feel compelled to answer this ad? Okay, here's another.
With a shotgun.
With a shotgun, right. Here's another example. This was in a newsletter for a local nursing home. Long-term commitment, recent widow, has just buried 4th husband, and I'm looking for someone to round out a 6-unit plot. Dizziness, fainting, shortness of breath, not a problem. Okay, now the last one I pulled up because I just like to pretend I can do an Irish accent, so I pulled a newspaper from Dublin. And you can just imagine this is the voice of the guy who is writing it. Heavy drinker, 35, seeks gorgeous sex addict interest in a man who loves his pints, cigarettes, Celtic football, and starting fights on Patrick Street at 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, pretty good. So what is wrong with these ads? What's wrong with, I mean, and really, it is kind of interesting. If you were to look at classified ads in a newspaper, this is where people who don't write advertising copy often might go to write an ad. What happens in these ads that makes them not stand out? That could be that. Small target, wrong target market. They're writing to people that they're not writing to people all about themselves. And they're trying to sell something that's all about themselves. Now, these are, of course, are joke ads, and the benefits that they are offering or the features of themselves that they're mentioning are not necessarily ones that would attract somebody. There may be people out there and if anybody here is a redneck Irish widow, I'm very sorry for you. But this is something that happens in advertising all the time, even for if you see brand advertising for people who sell stuff on television. Or if you go to a client, you sit down with a client, and the one that is not marketing savvy will want to talk all about themselves. We've been in business for this many years. We have the product comes in these sizes and these colors, and et cetera, et cetera. Lots of stuff about themselves. But nothing in there about the person that they're marketing to. And the thing that stands out is somebody who talks about the person they're marketing to. And I did kind of pick these. I picked them tongue-in-cheek and also so we could do the Irish accent. But also because I like to think about the buyer-seller relationship more along the lines, less as a kind of abstract business thing, but more along the lines of a relationship between people. I don't know if anybody was in the last presentation that we just did over there, but I said that in there too. That when you talk to somebody, it's helpful to think that how would you talk to somebody that you wanted to get to know? Would you walk up? Think of the bore at the party who just goes up and talks all about himself. How attractive is that? Think of the bore, the person who comes up to the party and says, hey, how do you do, So what do you like to do? That's a little bit more interesting. Okay. A fantastic book that I got to read for the first time about a year and a half ago because the copies were hard to come by was Gene Schwartz's Breakthrough Advertising. It's now a little bit easier to get. It was out of print for a long time. It's come back into print. It's a little bit easier to find. But Gene Schwartz said that the key to understanding the people that you're marketing to is that the customer's mind has 3 dimensions. Knowing what they desire, what your prospect deeply wants or needs, what they identify with, in other words, what they aspire to be, how they see themselves in the future changed into what they want to be, and what they believe, what they already foundation of where they're starting, with what the things that you're not going to go along and shake their beliefs on. So those are the 3 things, and Will and I are going to go retire to the bar now, I guess? Yeah. It's done. All right, cool. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Okay. What I want to do is I thought we could flip this around and talk about these 3 dimensions and explore them to see how it is that these are the things that let us know what prospects are like. But I thought we needed to start when we talk about it over the phone, over Skype, really. We have to talk about what they believe first, because what they believe is the thing that they come to you with that you probably are not going to be able to change, and that you're going to have to find some way to get in sync with the things that they already believe. And anybody who's had a political discussion with a friend or an enemy in the last couple of months, have you had that experience? Where you go to somebody and you think you've got one reason why this candidate or that candidate is your favorite, and you've got an opinion and it's supported by all kinds of rationale, and then you go and you try and convince the other person, and no matter how perfect your rationale is, you get nowhere. That's because they have beliefs that they come to you with, and you're not appealing to those beliefs. You're coming up against them. So they dig in and they try and counter you. So you're never going to sell anything to anybody until you can find out what it is they believe and have some kind of overlap with it. I bring up politics because, well, one, it's been so front and center, but 2, because you recognize this. Anybody recognize this thing? This is relatively, if you have watched any of the debates, we're carefully avoiding our candidate. What do you have? We had a write-in candidate. We're not telling you what our position is on the politics. We don't want to get into politics here, but during the debates, they had this little thing at the bottom of the screen, and you could watch this thing going up and down as the candidates talked. It was a reflection of whether they liked or disliked whatever that candidate was saying at the time. So did they believe that this was a good thing or a bad thing? So I had this on my mind because it's a little bit of a new technology, and I was reading an article later on about advertising, and somebody mentioned one of the great advertising giants as George Gallup. Now, I always thought George Gallup was the pollster guy, which he was, but apparently he had a long history in advertising. And we don't have to run through those little fours there.
I know. I was just wondering that. They're all equally important.
I rate each of these a 4 on the peer review scale. It's so important. We don't have to read through all the bullets, but he worked with Young and Rubenkamp, a famous advertising agency. And he worked with them starting in 1932 through 1937. Well, that was an interesting time to be in advertising because it was in the heart of the Great Depression. And the work that he did was figuring out what the customers, this is work that people hadn't done before, figuring out what the target market was interested in, figuring out where they were, what positions they held, what they thought was important or not important. And he managed to quadruple the revenues of Young and Rubenkamp. And they had so much business, they actually, in 2 years, 2 years in a row, they had to turn down new clients. They couldn't accept anybody because they were so full. Because all he did was figure out how to know what people wanted, know the prospects. Okay. Do you want to, are you going to stand up here and look handsome?
Yes. No, I was enjoying hearing you talk.
Why don't you tell us about the demographics?
Well, demographics are where most B and C level copywriters focus. And it's what here is pretty obvious: age, sex, ethnicity, job, income, location, that sort of thing. And they're important to know, but there's a real danger in relying heavily on that and getting back to the past election. That right after the election, I read some statistics that, the word I cannot say well, some statistics that surprised me. And the statistics were, well, let me ask you, if you already know this, you're not allowed to answer. And I can tell, I can look into your eyes. If I look into your eyes, I will be blinded because of those lights. But besides that, hypothetically, if I were to ask you, for which presidential candidate would you expect the people who earn $50,000 and less a year to vote for? And which candidate would you expect the ones $200,000 and more to vote for? And I think somebody who depends on demographics solely for their copywriting would probably say, well, the 50K and below maybe is Obama, the 200,000K and above is McCain. In fact, both those groups, over 50% chose Obama. Now, what makes that surprising is that it's counterintuitive if you just look at demographics. It really is counterintuitive, and I have my theories of why that's so. But it calls up the problems of just looking solely at these things. These are important, but they're not at all the end all and be all of figuring out who your prospect is.
And yet it's the way it is in the beginning. People, that's what they look to right away. Well, how old's the prospect? How much money do they make? Where do they live? What's their background? What do they do for a living? And as Will says, it's a place to start. It's definitely a place to start. But it's not quite enough. You can go deeper. Psychographics is the idea. There's also a term called neuromarketing or neuroscience marketing. It's trying to figure out more about the way people think. So how do you figure out where their mind is? How do you look at somebody and go beyond the general assumptions of what they look like and who they are? So a lot of these things that you'll notice, hobbies, interests, political affiliations, favorite periodicals, these are things we start to figure more out by watching their behaviors rather than just watching the stuff that you would fill out on a form when you get your driver's license. So if you were going to be in a situation where you wanted to figure out what people were thinking and you were going to try and market to them, how would you do that without having an enormous George Gallup, the Gallup organization, or how would you poll your prospect to see what it is that they're like? Well, you'd have to start digging in and going around, knocking around in the world that they do, and try and figure out more of what they have responded to. So we don't have to, you have the list. I don't want to run through the bullets again. You have the list that's written in here. We could just, is there another, I'm going to put them both up there, and we'll just pick out some of these maybe.
Well, before we do, or rather than getting into specifics, is, well, some of them are ones that you would basically be push-pulling. You'd go and ask somebody. But getting back to our previous discussion of the election, this is an election that I cannot imagine how anybody could be undecided. The undecided people, I think, were basically telling the pollsters, I don't want to tell you, go away. And so what I look at these as some excellent ideas, but to go, you know, if you're talking about, for instance, yourself, your family, friends, and if I were to go up and ask somebody, well, what do you think about whatever, they might give me an answer, but I would learn a lot more if somehow a conversation came around to that and I sat and listened quietly. You can ask, you can push-pull, but it makes a lot of sense to, if we're talking about getting to know your prospect, it makes a lot of sense to be as subtle as you can so you can really start hearing people's attitudes.
Well, the basic idea there is figuring out, I like to give an example of people, popular books and movies. So you're trying to figure out what people care about right now. And you're at a Barnes & Noble or one of the other mega bookstores, and you can go and you look at the place where they have the magazine racks, and you see on the magazine racks, you know, a funny thing that wasn't exactly funny, but what happened to us when we moved over to France. We moved over to France in July of 2001. And we had an apartment that we sublet in New York, and we would go back and forth to the apartment in New York. We're keenly aware of what the mindset was in New York shortly after 9/11 and in the United States. But you would go, we went through a lot of airports and train stations and things. We would see magazine racks. Now, of course, lots of them were talking about 9/11 and things that were, all the things that were news-related, but you still had Condé Nast and other people out there, and they had to sell magazines. Well, all of a sudden, all the little teasers on the magazines are no longer about great European getaways or places you can go in Latin America or exotic places that are on the Mediterranean. All of a sudden, they're about best B&Bs in New England or something in somewhere in the Midwest. So now that's not completely surprising, but it was clear looking at this, especially when you look at it en masse. Wow, you really are not going to be able to sell anything that's going to sell people on going overseas. Now that's back, but it's a little bit different now, and it's even changing right now because the strength of the dollar is going up or down, or people are talking about things, you know, 10 vacations that you can take without driving too far, using a lot of gas, or 5 great things to do at home this year. So you look at that popular media that they're plugging into, and you're starting to see what it is that they're feeling, what they believe, or what movies are the big hits, or if you're in any situation where you're writing copy for somebody who has sold something before, you want to go back and look at the promos that those people have written and have been extremely successful, because that's going to tell you more than anything, that any conversation with somebody who has a vague idea of that audience, what they actually responded to. That's going to reveal a lot of their inner psyche. And we know from having this, the point about talking about the elections and how they're related is that so many deeper things are going on underneath that are coming forward about the elections. And a lot of people are coming forward about anything, but in the case of the elections, you could look at somebody who picks one candidate or picks another candidate, and you know that their choice might be based on weighing a tax plan versus another tax plan. It might be based on who's better for security or who is better for who has more experience or whatever. But it also might be based on something that they remember from a long, long time ago, or something that's deeply personal to them and their family background. So that's that kind of stuff that you're trying to dig out and you're trying to get to. And the only way you can do that is really just roll up your sleeves and just dig into all the stuff that is circulating and swirling around them. Well, here we go, Gene Schwartz. It's so important to know that when you go out to somebody and you are trying to introduce some kind of new thing to them, because this is a classic mistake that can be resolved just with this simple understanding. Classic copywriting mistake is that you're not trying to educate somebody about something they're not aware of. You're not trying to make them accept a truth that they did not accept before. What you're trying to do is go out and find somebody who already holds some kind of belief that you know that you share, and say, look, I share that with you. And I also have a little bit something else that's compatible with that we could talk about maybe and do business over. A service that you might want or something in exchange for something. And key for Gene Schwartz was this idea of you're going from what people already know, moving to what's new. But you can't do that until you already know what it is that they know. So once you have made that connection, then you're going back in and you're providing the proof. But that proof that you're providing is proof that reaffirms the thing that they already suspect. So you're going in and you're giving them the talking points that they didn't have. So when they get to the end, when they begin with you, they have a certain amount of conviction. When they get to the end, they're absolutely full of the same belief, share the same belief. I don't want to run through these flavors. So Michael Masterson talked about these in the initial thing, and we did a little bit over there. But Gene Schwartz illustrated this by saying that some people are very aware of the product or position that you have, and some people are not very aware at all. And the key understanding about this is that you speak differently to somebody who's aware of who you are and not aware of you. This is about knowing what they believe when they come to you. If they believe your product is a solution for them, then you talk to them one way. If they believe they have a problem but they don't know that your product or solution exists, then you talk to them another way, and so on. It really is an amazing book, and even if you're talking to a business owner, it's not a book of copywriting tips. It's a strategic book for, I would say, copywriting that steps up, and advertising that steps up above writing catchy headlines, because it teaches you a little bit about business strategy and why the copy works the way it works. Again, this is talking about them to people more directly or indirectly based on their awareness level. Don't need to linger on that too much, I don't think. Okay, identifications. This is the idea that people aspire to be something. They have an image of themselves that they want to make more real. It may not necessarily be that image, but they try and drift toward it. I had a funny experience in Germany that somebody said, it was told to me by a guy who's a really nice copywriter, but he's very scary. He's just a very unusual character. And I don't want this to get back to him or anything. But what are his initials? He's tall, he's very smart, and he has like a large cranium with his big brain, and he's very earnest, and he's always leaning in, and he's meticulous with detail. And he was telling me that he had done some research and found that the customers that responded to copy very much resembled, even physically resembled, the copywriters who had written the promotions they responded to. So I just kept looking at him thinking, oh my God, a room full of you. This was terrifying. But we tend to drift toward things that make us feel that something's going to be a certain way. And you need to know what that is. What are they going to be? So Will and I were talking, and we thought this is a good example of somebody who's using this right now as a famous ad campaign.
Am I the only person who sees Bob Bly on the left?
I thought he was on the right here, really.
Well, depending on how you're standing.
This whole dynamic between PCs and Macs, this is a totally computer-driven world. Who here doesn't use a computer? And who here uses a Mac? Say, yeah, like yes.
Yes.
Now, if I had done that the other way, who here uses a PC? You know, is there somebody who's saying, yes, PCs rock? It doesn't really happen. Because Apple figured out that there are some people out there who are, well, like me too. I'm a bug-eyed, fanatical Mac user. One of the most awful people to have in the room. Because the PC users out there, their computers do all the same things that the Macs do, and the Macs do the same things that the PCs do. They're practically the same computer now. They're ripping each other off, and they're going to be more so in the next couple of years. But they figured out, well, when all those things are on the table, there's still got to be some other way to market this. And there's something about the PC users, well, there are jillions of them, and the differences between, and Windows has done a fantastic thing, Microsoft has done a fantastic thing with their ad campaigns. Have you seen these things?
No.
Where they now have people come out, and they're from every stripe of society, talking about how they use their PCs. And they use their PCs, some for spreadsheets, some for making music, some for making movies. And they all say, I'm a PC, and I use mine to make music. PC, and then a couple of quirky things. So they're really, you'll see this ad campaign disappear. You have to be the PC.
I refuse to be the PC. I have never been politically correct in my life.
Okay, so here they go. They wanted to make fun of now that the PC mindset that's the stiff guy in the suit who's just not that cool, and then here's the guy who's relaxed and casual, and even when they talk, they're looking for that persona because they want to sell people the computer not just based on what it can do, but they want to sell it based on how the person feels when they're going to use it. And this is all the stuff that's behind brand advertising, but it happens in direct response too. You're giving somebody a feeling. You're saying, look, we aspire. Human beings are social animals. We do need to be plugged into groups, and we do tend to congregate in groups that we feel comfortable in, and we feel most comfortable around people who are like us. And if you can say to somebody, if anybody's read that book, Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, one of the key things, and if we end up having time, which I'm sure we won't, end up having time, the influence that he talks about, the power of being able to say in as many ways as possible, I'm like you. We have share a similar ground. And then from there, then they can aspire to being directed to changing into, I'm like you, we share this common ground, but I've achieved this, and now you can achieve this too because I'm just like you did and I did it. That's kind of what's going on here. It was funny because when we're looking for this is an old Apple ad from the 80s when Apple first was doing pretty well. I would probably, seeing this now, I would switch over to being a PC user because I don't want to be that guy in the all denim dude. Yeah. Well, I used to have that hair more. I used to have longer hair. But okay, so they've been doing this for a while.
Let me interject just briefly. When you say that it's, let me ask you, it's important to be able to tell the person that I'm like you. Are those words you use?
No. In fact, you could never say that because that's like saying to somebody, I'm honest. Well, yeah, sure you are. Or how about, you want to go in and impress people with how funny you are. Hey, I'm funny. No, really, I'm funny. Come on, laugh. It just doesn't work. You have to go in and say to somebody, show them that you're like them. And now to be like them is in many thousands of different ways. And it could be based on their demographics, but it's usually the psychographics or some other kind of thing, the similarities. Here's another, I thought this was a fascinating, two images that we are all immediately recognizable to us, the Marlboro Man. Now, what do cowboys and horses and ropes and the West and stuff have to do with cigarettes? Not that much, really. But they knew that those people who they wanted to smoke Marlboro Reds, that they probably were these kinds of guys. And now here's another, I don't even smoke, so I don't know why I picked these, but here's another ad where they did the same thing. But would it have worked if we took this leggy dancing woman and we put her in a cowboy hat with ropes and on a horse? Virginia Slims.
Ropes?
It might have.
Ropes?
Well, yeah. There's a website for that, I think. But what are they trying to do? They know that the people that are moving toward this, that they're trying to say to women, if you smoke Virginia Slims, you will be the type of go-getter woman who's still feminine and attractive and all this stuff, but you're ahead of the game. This is no longer about a stick of tobacco about this long wrapped in thin paper that burns funny. It's now about liberation for women and the great movement and being out there and being an individual.
Leathery skin.
This actually goes way back to somebody. The first guy who did this was the guy who invented public relations. I don't know why his name is slipping my mind right now. But Edward Bernays. He figured out that the way to get more women smoking in the early 1900s was to hire, he hired about 10 women of around 20 to 30 years old with cigarettes when it was considered disgusting for women to smoke and offensive for women to smoke in public. And he had them walk down Fifth Avenue in New York with cigarettes in hand. And it was a publicity stunt, and it was the beginning of a big campaign for getting women to smoke. So if you want to blame somebody for trying to quit smoking, it's his fault. Okay, here's one more. Here's a guy. Here's somebody who identifies who would buy this product. Who's the person who would buy this? The guy, the Marlboro Red smoker? No? Me? Will? I wouldn't buy this car. I live in the city. I don't have a car. Is it the same guy who'd buy this car? No, not really. They're both nice vehicles, but you would have to know what does that person aspire to be?
Very quickly, the four-wheel drive truck. My wife and I live up in mountains of California, and status symbol of a four-wheel drive truck is if it's got some dings in it and some dents, and the bed is all mangled up and has wood chips in it, because they're working vehicles, and it says something about the people who drive them. And you go down to the San Francisco Bay Area, and this is what they all look like. They're pristine. And so the identification, we're talking about identification, the identification with these products are entirely different according to the people who use them, where you are, and all that. But so it's the key behind this is to be careful what you bring into your assumptions about the identification. Let your prospect tell you what those are.
Right. Although I would probably never try to sell like hand cream to somebody who drives one of those trucks. Soft hands.
No, but you sell soap, hand soap.
My sister said to me last year or something. She grabbed my hand when she was saying something over a holiday we were visiting. She said, "You have really soft hands." It's like, that is the rudest thing anybody's ever said to me. And I type all day. You know what? I got calluses on my fingertips. So.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, this is a quote from Gary Bensaveng, extremely successful copywriter. I apologize for the big block of text on a PowerPoint slide. It's usually forbidden, but I felt like I couldn't cut any of this out. Gary says, hugely successful guy, the vast majority of products are sold because of the need for love, the fear of shame, the pride of achievement, the drive for recognition, the yearning to feel important, the urge to look attractive, the lust for power, the longing for romance, the need to feel secure, the terror of facing the unknown, the lifelong hunger for self-esteem, and so on. Emotions are the fire of human... Excuse me for a minute. Fire of human motivation, the combustible force that secretly drives most decisions to buy. When your marketing harnesses those forces correctly, you will generate explosive increases in response. How often have you written on an application form or a driver's license form about your need for love, the fear of shame, the pride of achievement, the urge to look attractive, the lust for power? Not too often. These things are totally invisible to the purely demographic marketer. But enormously important. And figuring out what these things are is the hard work of being a good copywriter.
What happens if I write copy that touches those directly?
I'm not sure what you mean. I would say
my headline says
explosive increase in response. Is that what you're looking for?
No, what I'm looking for is if you address those as they are laid out on this in this paragraph.
You mean, so if you had a headline that says, "Do you have a lust for power?"
Your prospect will feel manipulated.
You would, or you'd only get like Mussolini or something.
Yeah.
Would reply.
Yeah. So
yes.
Subtlety.
Because we're uncomfortable talking about those things to other people. You don't usually say to somebody you don't know that well, "Oh, God, I have such a need for love." If you do, you'd probably be the loneliest person in the room pretty quick.
Oh, you could be
like,
fat,
oh my God, don't
fat,
go over and talk to...
flatulent, and 40.
Don't go talk to that fat, flatulent 40-year-old copywriter, John Ford over there. He needs a need for love. Or a lust for power. I can't figure out which it is. Okay. Desires. The first in that list that we gave, and the last to attack maybe because it's the one that we feel like we're most familiar with, that we're marketing to what people really want or what they need. But maybe one of the trickiest to talk about without some kind of setup, which I hope we had in the other parts. So here's George Gallup again. My main thesis is that far too little attention has been paid by researchers to study of human needs to provide the kind of intelligence that the advertising planner or copywriter must have to produce effective campaigns. This is my graphic and not his, but he felt that the basic equation of just about everything when you're talking about marketing was you figure out what the need of the customer is, and then you figure out how well the product is going to fulfill that need, and the tension in between them is how high you can set the price. So if it's a really amazing solution that's hard to get, and the need is really deeply felt, you could probably price it higher. That was his basic premise. Now, I think Will and I would probably agree that maybe the one funky part of that quote from him is that he talks about needs. But that quote from Gary Ben-Savanga, some of that is about needs, but a lot of it is about what people want. And you could survive with without a lot of the things that you think are needs. There are some basic needs like shelter and food and oxygen. But you start drifting into these things that you want, and the wants are so much more compelling. Why? Because they're so much more wrapped up. They have an emotional pull to them that's hard to resolve, that's hard to satisfy. They're so much more abstract wants. I mean, we all know that we need to have food, but then when you start talking about food, you're a foodie type, right? You're a cook.
I love to cook.
You love to cook.
I just don't eat anymore.
But and cooking, people who cook, well, there's no real need to be a fantastic cook. There's probably no need to put garlic in anything. But I would be so sad if you couldn't put garlic in anything anymore, wouldn't you?
You get an argument there.
We could all survive on bowls of protein meal and supplements or something, probably. But we don't want to live that way.
And a good copywriter...
In France, they don't believe anything that I just said.
Yeah. A good copywriter is able a good copywriter understands that it is wants that drive the purchase, that you have to try to make your prospect perceive them as a need, or as tying into a need.
But something that is so important about this is a Gene Schwartz message, is that you have to accept the fact that you are not creating desires in people. You're channeling desire. You're figuring out what people want, and you're channeling it towards something. I think one of the funny things that, well, you can tell me if you had this experience too, that in the years that I've been doing copywriting and figuring out about marketing, and I really thought in the beginning I was just figuring out sort of a trade skill. I wanted to be a fiction writer in the beginning. That was what my interest was. But I found it really hard to pay the rent writing stories that you put into a box and never show to anybody. So I went on and I started figuring this out, and it was so funny how this stuff becomes a part of everything else that you do. So you're out there and you're talking to somebody and you're having conversations where you're not thinking about selling anything to anybody at all, but you can't turn off that part of your mind that's going, what is it that this person is thinking and feeling while I'm talking to them? And it's just funny. I mean, I think you'll notice that if you think about this, put this in the front of your mind and think about it for the next couple of days while you're here. Any conversations that you have, now this is going to make you self-conscious. This is like telling you that somebody is watching you while you walk, and then now all of a sudden you're walking like, am I walking right? But think about what is it in their mind? Why are they saying what they're saying? Not are they just answering my question, but what's really going on? What is their sort of hidden thing? What are they afraid of when they're talking to me about? What are they insecure about? What do they want? What did they feel confident about? What are they dying for me to ask them about? So you'll just think about that, because that's exactly what you're doing when you're trying to look at these customers. You're trying to figure out what is it that they're dying to do or know or change their lives about, so that I can now speak to them and I can identify that for them and bring it out in a way that's not going to make them feel uncomfortable. This is a survivor from our last presentation. Do you want to run through, or?
No, the only one I wanted to talk about was, these are the list of common desires. They're also close to
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Hierarchy of needs. Thank you.
And
in there is sleep and security, and I really like the idea of understanding wants and how they hook up with needs, and I think that's where the desire really comes in. Maybe that's fine tuning a little bit too hard, but if you look at catalogs such as the one that you get on the airplane flying over, whatever that one is, Sky Mall. We ordered something from a Sky Mall catalog about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and since have been inundated with all sorts of gizmo catalogs, and I love them. I never buy from them, but I love them. But one that I've noticed recently are gizmos that will sterilize bedding for when you travel. And that you stop and think about that. Unless you're going to some third world country like the depths of Thailand or Paris or someplace like that, you probably don't need to sterilize your bedding. It's not a real need, but it is a want that people have to feel secure when they sleep. And so a clever copywriter understands that, or a clever marketer, the person who invented the damn thing, knows that if you only sell this to people who need to have their bedding sterilized, you're going to go broke. So, you look at all of these lists of common desires or Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and anything like that, and they really are inherent in human beings, but that's not why people buy. Figure out how you hook that up to what they want in their life.
Yeah, and in this list, there is kind of a blurring between that line of needs and wants. It's hard to identify where exactly they separate from one to the other. In his list, these things you can see are most, health and basic survival, food and shelter, sleep and security. It's sort of drifting toward that stuff as we get toward the end of the list. In the beginning, it's the most very basic stuff. We live an enormously privileged life, being in the first world or whatever, gradually slipping into the second world as the market plummets. And people live astoundingly austere lives and a lot of privation in the world. You move toward that end of that list, there are things here now that they become more and more abstract. Then you start thinking, these are things that drift towards one. I mean, certainly here is ease of accomplishment. There are people whose lives have been nothing but hard. There's sexual gratification. I bet there are a couple of people that their sex lives are not so good, but they're okay. They're still going to survive. Well-being of your children. Some people they don't have children. Or spiritual enlightenment. There are some people that seem like they couldn't care less. To be important, couldn't care less. Yet, when you start talking to people, you start finding shades of these things in them that might surprise you. Shades of these desires. So,
well-being of our children. You have 2 children, right?
I have 2 children.
I have one grown child.
I don't really care how it turns out for them. Yeah, well, no, I'm just kidding.
But if we were,
I only feel that way around 2:30 to 3 a.m. when Catherine is crying for some strange reason and won't stop.
You look at baby Einstein tapes. That presumably has to do with the well-being of our children. It has nothing at all to do with the well-being of our children.
I like watching them, though. I find them soothing. So here is kind of what we're drifting toward here is trying to figure out what that thing is that buzzes underneath. This is really the part that separates really exceptional ad copy from average ad copy, because somebody can figure out how to plug into this thing that people themselves, it's so deeply ingrained in them, so deep that they're not even sure themselves that this is what's motivating them. So I try to pick out some of these promises that you see a lot of: you're living healthier, live longer, have more energy, and then try to tie them to things that are. We had that question about crossing that line about death, whether or not people fear that or feel less mortal. Okay, so somebody says you living healthier. What's really going on there? Have more energy. There maybe really are people out there that are afraid of. Not maybe. There definitely are people out there who are afraid of dying. They're afraid of being older. You cross a certain point. Now, that point has drifted higher and higher. It used to be when you got to 35, that's when you went out and bought a sports car and got a blonde girlfriend. And that's moving up. People go through their midlife crisis. Yes, people start having their midlife crisis around 55 now. Now, I don't know a lot of 110-year-olds, but it's shifted. Earn more money, launch a business, win with stocks, feel successful. This is a huge thing for people. People want to be respected for their accomplishments. People want to go, you're pretty smart. They want to feel that way. You can't write to them and say, you're smart. That's your headline. you're smart. Probably wouldn't work that way, but if you could convey to them that sense that when they do something well, they're going to be respected, you might get more pull out of it than just making the straight promise. This is why in a different time, this is why when people would, like if you see those get-rich-quick, I haven't written any get-rich-quick packages, but it's such a hyperbole example, I think it's very clear. You've seen those things where people go out about winning a lottery or winning a program. Okay, let's talk about the, what was that thing that Ed McMahon used to do? Publishers Clearinghouse Sweepstakes. Well, what is it they want people to think about when they have the Publishers Clearinghouse Sweepstakes? You can't say, well, when you have a lot of money, everybody's going to really respect you because you're going to be so rich. But they will show you with a really nice car or on your yacht or all those other things. They do that because in your mind, that's how they want you to picture. That says to you that they're successful. Now, that's a crass image. They're more subtle and elegant images of that, but it's not unusual to try and show somebody what it would be like to be in that good situation. This is the identifications working here. But you have to figure out what is that deeper thing that they want. I would say most of the time, people want to be respected or loved, and they want to live long enough to enjoy it.
We do ourselves, and Michael Masterson said this for many years, is we really do ourselves a disservice when we talk about greed, by and large, with the exception maybe of a few CEOs. I've said this before. Mm-hmm. But most people don't want to acquire things just to acquire them. They want it for the respect, the admiration, the jealousy that people will feel. You know? So it is that getting to that deeper second desire.
Well, why do billionaires go to work in the morning? What's the point?
Yeah.
I mean, look, let's scale it back. I mean, why does anybody with $20 million, I could be okay. If I had $20 million, I'd feel okay. I don't think that my life would change significantly if I had $30 million or $50 million. Are you saying that because you already have $50 million? Let me tell you, $50 million. There's this need for achievement. Maybe they feel fantastic about what they do and it provides a great service. Maybe their father never loved them and they want to prove to that SOB that they're as better than they were ever imagined to be. Maybe they somebody who goes out. I feel a little bit like Gordon Gekko in Wall Street. You bring up the idea of greed. I liked that movie, that Wall Street movie. I'm sure some of you guys have seen it. There's that famous part where Gordon Gekko goes along and he gives a speech about greed is good. And everybody points at that and say, see, this is what's wrong with the world, that somebody get up there and say greed is good. But you know what? In a sense, I'm not money obsessed. I like to have some. But there could be somebody out there who wants to earn money because they love their children. Or they have grandchildren and they love the grandchildren. Or they love their spouse. And they want to make sure that that spouse is provided for when they're gone. That's a motivation that lies underneath. That's a second secret desire and stronger than the one that you can figure out by looking just at the person and saying, oh, this is a guy who loves money.
I wonder what happened to Bill Gates when he was in third grade.
Yeah.
Because he is nothing about money. Absolutely nothing.
You know, I just found out why Muhammad Ali became a boxer. I just saw this, and we don't have any American TV over in France. We don't watch TV that much. So the History Channel is on, so I'm watching all these stupid History Channel things. He became a boxer because somebody stole his bike.
Yeah.
When he was 12 years old, some kid stole his bike. And he said, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill the guy who stole my bike. And he went running down looking for the guy who stole his bike. And one of the places he ran into was a boxing gym. And the guy said, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to beat the snot out of him. And he says, you want to learn to fight? And he said, yeah. And that's when he got started.
You do a better Muhammad Ali than you do Irish.
Really? That's the first time I've ever done Muhammad Ali. Here's a quote that just kind of supports what we're saying here. Copy cannot create desire for a product. It can only take the hopes, dreams, fears, and desires that already exist in the hearts of millions of people and focus those already existing desires onto a popular product. This is the copywriter's task, not to create the mass desire, but to channel and direct it. There are lots and lots of great copywriting texts that are worth reading. I didn't put those up here because I wanted to focus on the ones that were mostly about, knowing your audience. And these are some really useful ones that would be great reads. Psychology of Influence and Persuasion. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. Is there anybody who has never heard of it? It's very interesting. Very interesting book. written by a guy who was initially did it because he was trying to get away from marketing and figure out why it was making him respond to stuff, and then he figured it out. This is about looking inside ourselves and the trigger actions that we take. I think we have another slide coming up after this. Tipping point, about the social phenomenons and what moves this tide of mass desire, how people move towards things. Breakthrough advertising, we've talked about plenty. How to win friends and influence people is I'm sure you've also read that too. It's one of the most popular selling books of all time. It's basically about shutting up and listening to people, about finding out what they care about, and that's how you connect with people, which is what a good copy does, is figure out how to connect with people on their terms rather than your own. And Predictably Irrational is one that I just read. I don't know if you guys have read this, but very good book. It's very interesting. I think I've added it into my must-recommend list about why we do things that just don't seem to make sense until you look deeper into them, and it seems more clear.
And
each one of these could be a presentation and then some all by themselves.
to that list, I want to add Words That Work by Frank Luntz. He is the genius who invented the term death tax, contract for America. And the book is, although he acknowledges his political bent, he goes into great detail about why certain politicians fail and certain politicians succeed, and it has to do with words that work. And if you read it for no other reason than to verify that everything you've learned at boot camp and from the programs here in AWAI is true, it will do that. It will verify it, because he's basically talking about everything you're learning. But it's a good book.
I wonder if this is opening a can of worms to put this up here, because this is a lot of stuff to talk about in one 3-minute and 52-second segment.
Read the book.
Read this book. Read this book, and you will learn all these valuable items. Let's just point to a couple of them. Okay, reciprocation. We tend to want to do things for people who have done something for us. It's very hard to resist doing something for somebody that helps you out. Here's a quick example. Bob Bly, I have an e-zine that I put out. I just refuse to say e-zine. I don't know why Michael Masterson will say that. An e-zine that I put out called the Copywriters Roundtable. And it's free. Some people probably read it. I don't know. If you want to read it, just type in Jack Ford in Google, or John Ford, and you'll find an article that has a link to it, or you can go to the website, copywritersroundtable.com. I never shill for my own, even though it's free, for my own newsletter, but I feel like I have to start doing that, so I just did. But Bob Bly sent me a note that said, hey, John, can you recommend my newsletter to your list, and I'll recommend yours to my list? Well, of course, Bob has 80,000 names, and I have 10,000 names. So I'm ecstatic to do that anyway. And I really like Bob. I've known him for a long, long time. And his Copywriter's Handbook was one of the first copywriting books that I read, and he's just a really nice guy. So, of course, I would already have recommended his, and I do recommend his e-letter to my list. But he knew also that by coming and saying, I'd like to recommend you to my list, can you recommend me to your list? As soon as he did that, I thought, that now I really can't turn it down because I owe him. And I feel like I owe Bob a lot anyway. But anyway, that's an important point. That's why people have a lot of free giveaways, or somebody will write a promotion that gives you information just right off the top of the bat that the promotion is useful in itself. Commitment. There's an interesting thing from the 1950s, and I think this is in the book, where people were selling whiskey. And they would ask people to write down on a piece of paper, they would copy off the little made in the whiskey tradition of something or whatever, and send that back in to, I don't know if this is the best example, they'd send it back into the whiskey makers, saying that they wanted to be members of some club or something like that. Is that the right example? No, it's not. But remember that example, because it's very important.
Yeah.
If you can get somebody to commit to something, once they've committed to it, it's very hard to get them to back down. Social proof. When people are in a crowd and they see other people who are doing things, if you see everybody else has an iPod and you go out to buy another MP3 player, you're a little bit embarrassed your MP3 player kept in your pocket because it's not an iPod, possibly. people tend to buy. There's a wave of people. You see other people do it, you want to do it. That's just something we can't resist. It's ingrained in our DNA. People like to do things for people that they like better than for people they don't. That seems self-evident. A lot of this seems self-evident. Authority, people want to know what your background is. If Will and I had gotten up here and said, we've never really written copy before, but we'd like to talk to you about it, you'd probably not take it seriously. And scarcity is that things seem more valuable when there are fewer of them or you have less access to them. So and with that in mind, if you guys have any questions, you have exactly 3 seconds left.
Scarcity, limited edition.
I think thank you very much, and you can catch us between segments because I think we need to move on.
Yes.
But thank you.